Hello Internet, and welcome to my review for Boruto Naruto Next Generations episode 70. When we last left off, Chocho arc. Let's forget about it. Moving on to the episode proper, we have really nothing that happened last week matters. It's a full standalone episode, and we open on Team 5 is given a mission to transport a plate that is apparently some kind of national treasure. And Metal shows up with an amulet designed to cure anxiety. And that becomes a big point of the episode. But I do really like his reliance, his eagerness to rely on some magic cure-all for his anxiety does feel very childlike. And given that he's, still, even though he's a ninja, he's 12 tops, maybe 13. And so it does feel appropriately like something a kid would do. Even if it does kind of lead to some weirdness later on that I'll get to in a little bit. But then they take the plate, the opening credits happen, and then we cut back to the job area, and we find out that they destroyed the plate in about 5 seconds because Metal still got nervous. Though he claims it was because his hand slipped, not because he was nervous. And it's weird to me that there is no punishment whatsoever for Metal destroying a national treasure. Apparently this is, if it's a national treasure, it's gotta be important, it's gotta be expensive. Metal shatters it, and all that happens to him is at the end of the episode, the woman lady who is giving out jobs is like, don't break it this time, all creepy style. And besides that, nothing happens there. So that's a little weird. But then we cut to adult Dad Rock Lee, training Metal in the eight inner gates, and at the very least, before Lee notices the amulet, I do really like how much of a good dad he is. Lee hasn't had a lot to do in Boruto. Besides, he was the proctor for one of the exams. I forget which one. I feel like it was the tournament part. But I do like he's just kind of a good dad. Even if he does not react the best to the amulets, he could have, I get that he's very much in teacher mode and not in dad mode at that point, and so he knows that just telling Metal what he did wrong won't really help him in the same way that, having him learn for himself will. But before that, he's very much the good dad. But then after, Lee tells Metal off, and Metal runs away, he's wondering what went wrong, and who should show up but Guy flying in on the wheelchair, it's kind of weird. He jumps, the wheelchair drops straight down, which is kind of, it shows that Guy is still his old self, despite, a couple decades in the wheelchair. But how could the wheelchair drop straight down? There was nothing to drop straight down from. That's a bit of a nitpick. But it does kind of raise the point. Guy mentions that he's still doing rehab for his, losing his leg at the end of Naruto. And I'm assuming he has the same kind of deal that Naruto has with his arm. Excuse me. Where whatever Tsunade did, the bandage arm, I'm assuming that's what happened. Even though, as we see during his fight with Metal and Iwabe, it's still not strong enough for him to really support himself on it, which is an interesting little thing. But I'm kind of curious, at a certain point, he has to know whether or not rehab will work. It's been 2 decades since the 4th Ninja War, and he's still in rehab. It's just a little weird. I also find it weird that Guy doesn't recognize Metal instantly, which makes it seem like Guy just isn't really a part of the Lee's life. Which does not really feel like the Rock Lee that we know. The fact that the Guy is not acting like a granddad to Metal at all times does not quite seem in character. Anyway, Guy tells Metal that he's going to the academy to give this lecture about something. He brings up the fourth Ninja War when we actually see the lecture, but was still not entirely sure what it's supposed to be about. And Metal wheels him to the academy until they run into every wheelchair-bound person's one weakness, stairs. And so Metal just fucking lifts the wheelchair. Like, what a legend. Even if he is still, anxiety-driven, anxiety-stricken, when people see him doing it, he still just fucking lifts the wheelchair. Like, what a good boy. What a good boy. But after that, they head to the academy, where they run into Iwabe and Denki, the other two members of Team 5, and we find out, to really no one's surprise, Iwabe is just a huge guy fan. Like, that's definitely something that's in character, so it's nice to see him as just a huge fucking guy fan. And it's also a good way to get all of Team 5 into the action of the episode, where it very well could have just been Metal and Rock Lee the entire time. It's a much more seamless introduction to them than, Team 7 just popping up at the beginning and the end for no real reason, just happening to be in the place at the same time. This felt a lot more natural than that. And then we cut to the lecture itself, where Guy goes on to tell them about his experience in the Fourth Ninja War, and we find out that, just like with Kisame back in the day, he still can't remember people's names. Despite the fact that Madara is the biggest villain the world ever faced, besides Kaguya, Madara just can't remember his name. Which actually does kind of lead me to a kind of interesting thing, is that I've kind of noticed whenever people talk about the war, they don't talk about Obito and Madara. It's like, Obito, I get that he kind of redeems himself by the end, and so Naruto, out of respect for him, might try to leave his part in starting the war out of it. But Madara was opposing them until his death. So the fact that Naruto has kind of put the whole thing on Kaguya is just kind of weird. That's kind of something I wanted to bring up for a while, but this episode kind of brings it to the forefront, I feel. The Madara has just kind of been excised from history. It almost seems like, especially because you'd expect the kids to have who have grown up on the history of the Fourth Ninja War to know who Madara is, and yet they don't. They also seem to be they're waiting with bated breath to find out Madara's name, and then they're disappointed when Guy doesn't know it, which is still kind of weird. But then Guy wants to show that he can still fight even with the missing leg, and so he invites Iwabe and Metal to fight him, and I really like that fight. It's short and sweet, but the choreography is nice, and it does kind of show the two characters who they are. Iwabe feels that he can't really rely on Metal because of his anxiety, and Metal also feels like Iwabe can't rely on Metal because of his anxiety. It's just a really nice little thing to see there. But after that, they get their asses handed to them by Guy because he's Guy. And Guy gives him some words of advice. He needs to look inward, whatever. And then we cut to a scene at night as Metal is trying to train. And we see he says he still needs the medallion to help him control his anxiety. Despite the fact that we have seen him when he spars with Guy, the medallion did not do jack shit against his anxiety. And sure, he does have the solution, maybe he needs more medallions, which is just not how it works. But whatever, it's a weird little thing. I feel like at that point he should have realized the medallion was worthless instead of I need more. But then he gets more, and that hampers his sneaking around mission because he's a ninja and all the chains are banging on each other. And so they fail the mission, and Lee shows up and challenges Metal. And I get that I definitely have the impression he was trying to be acting to make him seem harsher than he was. But I still feel like he's just a little uncharacteristically mean in his challenge to Metal. He's all I bet you can't even show up. Him inviting the entire academy to watch makes sense given that he's trying to cure Metal of his anxiety, or at least get Metal to deal with his anxiety. But Lee's just kind of mean about it in a way. Lee was never really mean in the original series. That's kind of a weird thing to me. And then the battle comes, and everyone thinks Metal is not going to show up, and then he does show up, and he gives this speech about realizing that he is not going to be able to cure his anxiety, but he can accept it. Where he like tears off the medallion. It's a big dramatic moment. But I just kind of feel like we should have seen, there should have been, instead of that scene being there in its full badass form, we should have had a scene where with him kind of like the scene earlier at night where he thinks he needs more medallions, where he realizes that he does not need them and tears them off there. Like, sure, maybe it would kind of undercut the suspense of whether or not Metal will show up, but given that there was never really any question about whether or not Metal will show up, it's too late in the episode for him to chicken out now. I feel like we should have had him just tear it off there, and then he walks into the academy room and everyone sees, oh shit, the medallion's gone. He is ready to face his anxiety. And then maybe Lee says, oh, your anxiety's cured, and then Metal's like, no, I'm just gonna live with it. I don't know. Maybe, I feel like that would have been better, just from a writing standpoint. Then Metal and Lee have their fight. And in Metal's first few blows, he just has really bad form. Like, most of the fights in this show are super graceful, you know, the punches are like straight lines, and Metal's all like flailing around, like barely manages to like even throw the punch on Lee initially, and then he gets blown back, and in what I can only describe as a callback to the original series' iconic Drunken Fist scene, he awakens Anxious Fist and starts going full on, you know, Drunken Fist style taijutsu godness on Lee, just like fueled by anxiety. You know, he sees the students and he's so scared that he ducks right as Lee throws a punch above him. The whole thing is just completely absurd. Like, as I mentioned, Drunken Fist level of absurdity. And it was definitely the highlight of the episode. Seeing, I hope it eventually gets named Anxious Fist or something like that. But anyway, that fight goes on and Metal accepts that like he's always going to be anxious and that's just a part of him. And he, through his anxiety, accidentally opens the first gate and lands a hit on Lee, winning the fight, because Metal only needs to land one hit to win. And so Metal's going to become a bit more confident, even if he still has his anxiety. And then we cut to the next day, where Team 5 is handed another transport the super fragile National Treasure mission. Which seems weird. Like, I get that the whole point of the episode is that, you know, Metal learned from his anxiety and is now ready to succeed at the same kind of thing he failed at. But from a logistical standpoint, from a, you know, assigning mission standpoint, who would give another Protect the National Treasure mission to the team that just broke a National Treasure 2 days ago? That's just kind of weird. Like, alright, I guess. I don't quite think that's how anything would happen, but I mean, I understand from a writing standpoint why. And then at the end, you know, the lady, like, scares him, as I mentioned before, and he seems real anxious again. And I'm hoping that's not all the character work this episode did is just gone, and more he can still succeed even with his anxieties. I still think they should not let Metal carry the National Treasure. Give it to, like, Iwabe or Denki, who are always calmer about stuff like this. But yeah, I hope it's not just like, oh, all the character work in this episode was meaningless because it's all just mindless filler, and more of, you know, Metal can succeed through his anxiety. So all in all, I think this was for one, a far better episode than anything the Chocho arc gave us, because the Chocho arc was trash. This episode was pretty good. It wasn't, you know, a standout. It wasn't anything it was, you know, worse than anything the tuning exam gave us. Even when it wasn't, you know, versus Momoshiki and everything. Even when it was just like, you know, Chocho and Shinki fighting, which is some great shit. That's the kind of Chocho shit I need in my life. It was still a good episode, you know. It was nice character work on Metal's part. Nice to see Guy again after all these years. Besides that, this kind of was. It looks like next week we're getting into a longer filler arc focusing on, I've heard Mitsuki and Onoki, of all people, who popped up for the preview, which I really can't wait to see him in action, because Onoki has done nothing in, like, 20 years, and he's super old now, and I'm shocked he's still alive. You know, he was alive when Madara was. I'd expect him to have, you know, passed away peacefully in his sleep by now. But, you know, maybe he will in the next arc. That's how the next arc goes down. But I'm kind of going to leave this off here. I hope you all enjoyed the chapter and the video. If you did, feel free to drop me a like or subscribe or whatever the fuck you want. I don't really care. And as always, people, keep kicking ass, and I'll see you in the future. Bye!